Good evening, viewers. Thank you for tuning in to the Rotary News Network. I'm Margie Seaman, your host from Seaman Realty and Management, and I am delighted this evening to introduce my friend and host of WJCT First Coast Connect, Melissa Ross.
Hi.
Hello, Melissa.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
It is great to have you. Melissa is going to be talking about the mayoral elections and some of the other elections coming up in Jacksonville that have some interesting elements to them. And Melissa, before we begin, I want to ask you a question that maybe you can share with the viewers who don't know. Today is the first day of early voting.
That's right.
And for those who don't know, why is early voting important, and when did it begin, and why should we early vote?
Sure. Well, it's an interesting history in Duval County, in particular after the 2000 election, of course, which no one in Florida will ever forget. There were irregularities and controversies in the voting in counties across Florida, but here in Duval County, lots of votes got tossed, tens of thousands, and primarily in African American precincts. This was a matter of huge controversy.
Tossed how?
They were thrown out as invalid because the supervisor of elections at the time, a guy named Stafford, I believe, tossed some of the ballots out because in some cases people had overvoted, or they'd bubbled in more than one name, or they'd undervoted, or the ballots weren't marked properly. Now keep in mind, this was in 2000, the year of the hanging Chad, and we had a very different system then. So they threw out ballots. Now, in an election where the vote isn't even close, nobody would have cared. But Florida came down to a few hundred votes. And so there was a lot of anger and frustration in Jacksonville's Black community in particular about those tossed ballots. Some people saw a conspiracy. Of course, the supervisor of elections office completely denied that. At one point, you had Jesse Jackson marching in the city. All of that combined, along with some other things that happened, led to this very strong push in 2004 and 2008 for more opportunities to get people out to vote, hence early voting and all the early voting precincts around town. When Barack Obama was running for election in Florida in 2008, his organization Organizing for America had a heavy presence in Florida pushing early voting. And so you have a situation now where typically how it works is Republicans tend to vote more by absentee ballot in Duval County and around the country. And Democrats and African American voters often tend to take advantage of early voting, voting that's convenient for their schedule, particularly if you have low income workers who might not be able to get out and vote during the day on election day. Maybe they can come at an odd time to vote because they have a shift job. Early voting works very well for some folks like that. So early voting begins today, and it goes for 2 weeks, ending the Sunday before Election Day. And on that final Sunday, you'll see a big Souls to the Polls effort where there'll be a push to get folks directly from church to the polls. That'll be their last opportunity to vote early before the actual day, which is May 19th.
Now, why did they stop the early voting 2 days before? Why not run right up to Election Day?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, actually.
Okay.
That has to do with election law. But
okay.
Yeah.
And also, why, where do people vote early? Is it the same election place that they would vote, polling place that they would vote now?
You can vote it. It's in some cases, your precinct is also an early voting location. For example, my polling place where I live is an early voting precinct location. But there are a few set up around town, along with the supervisor of elections office downtown. So you have to find your early voting site. You could go to any early voting site right now and vote early if you have your photo ID. Or you can wait until Election Day and vote either downtown at the supervisor's office or at your polling place in your neighborhood. Or you can vote by mail.
Okay.
You can do that too.
And if you want to know where your early voting place is, would you contact the League of Women Voters or the Supervisor of Elections?
I would say the Supervisor of Elections office, and their website is duvalelections.com.
Okay,
yeah,
great. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we have a hot mayoral campaign underway and a hot sheriff's election going on, and a lot of interesting city council races. Why don't we start with the top?
Sure.
And work our way down. What are your views about this mayoral election, and what do you think the major issue is that's going to be decisive in this election for mayor?
I don't think there's any one issue that will be decisive in the contest between incumbent Mayor Alvin Brown and Lenny Curry. I think it will come down to which campaign can better turn out their base of voters. It will all come down to turnout, because only about 30% of the registered voters are going to actually come out to the polls and vote in that election. So it becomes a matter of who's got the better ground game, who can better get candidates out to the polls, and which campaign is going to do a better job of swaying that slice of undecided voters to their side. You've got two interesting candidates. Mayor Alvin Brown, been in office 4 years, governed as a conservative Democrat. He has held the line on raising taxes and has, at the same time, while that has pleased conservative voters, at the same time has upset more progressive voters by not championing an expanded human rights ordinance for LGBT voters. Now, on the other hand, you've got Lenny Curry, former chair of the Republican State Party of Florida, local businessman, saying that the city needs a fresh look, new leadership. They bring two different approaches to the campaign, different strengths and weaknesses. And so the issues are, there are lots of issues. There's the city's pension situation, the city's finances. Those are really at the top of the list. But also other issues, job growth, social issues have come into play. But it's really going to be about turnout. Which campaign can turn their people out?
When does the pension fund issue need to be decided? It seems that it's been lingering longer.
It has, and there are some who think that the back and forth between the mayor and the city council is election season politics, that perhaps there are some on the council who want to deny Alvin Brown a victory on his pension reform package before this election. Of course, that's an allegation that's been strongly denied. But this pension problem in the city of Jacksonville, I think, will get addressed pretty shortly, no matter who is elected, because all of the parties involved realize it's absolutely critical to get it done.
Do you think that goes for the human rights ordinance as well?
You know, it's interesting. I think now that we live in a state where same-sex marriage is legal, and where the pressure continues to mount on this issue, and we're also going to have a new city council after July 1, I think it's a safe bet that in the next several years, this will probably get updated in Jacksonville, because that's just the way the winds are blowing. I think, though, right now you have two mayoral candidates whose polling suggests that they could lose votes in a tight election if they make a strong statement about that issue one way or the other, which is why you're not seeing any movement right now.
Now, am I correct that the Jacks Chamber came out in favor of Lenny Curry? Is that correct?
The Jacks Biz arm of the chamber, yes, they did, yeah.
And do you know the basis of that decision? That must have been a very difficult decision for them.
I'm sure it was, and I know that both the mayor and Lenny Curry sought that endorsement. And so that's an endorsement that went to Lenny Curry. Both candidates have been seeking high-level endorsements and trumpeting their endorsements. You know, Lenny Curry won the endorsement of UNF President John Delaney recently, former mayor. Then Alvin Brown, just a few days later, said, well, I've got the endorsement of Bill Bishop, who came in third in the city's mayor's race. And so the endorsement stakes have been really intense for quite some time.
Now, I know that at the primary, we did only have 30% turnout. So that means clearly 70% of our city didn't care to come out and vote, didn't care enough to come out and vote, which is a shocking percentage. Now, you just said that we're expecting 30%,
give or take,
at the actual election day. And I'm asking you, after all of these hot issues have been debated so much since the primary, do you really think we're not going to see a greater turnout than that 30%?
You know, I hope we do. I would hope we would see greater than that. It's tough to get people to turn out in a non-presidential election year. people just went to the polls and voted for, to the average voter, it feels like they just went to the polls and voted in the presidential election, even though it was a few years ago. And over again, you see that in non-presidential election cycles, turnout goes down. It's unfortunate.
Right.
It's very unfortunate because it is an important local election, and we'll be picking a mayor, a sheriff. There are two interesting candidates in that race. A slew of city council races will be decided, and that new body, 19-member body, is going to have to make some very important decisions on the pension situation, the budget, whether there are funds available to deepen the St. Johns River, which is another big imperative for the business community, and other things. So it is important that people get engaged.
Well, you know, I was raised to believe that voting is a privilege, and when you think about people around the world who don't have that privilege, of course it goes back to reaffirming how fortunate we are. Why do you think people don't care about a local election?
You know, I guess it's because in America we're so privileged and we take all of our wonderful freedoms for granted. I really think that's it. We don't appreciate what we have because this is all we've ever known. And there are people that fight and die in other countries for the right to vote and have a free election. And so, unfortunately, that's human nature. You just don't appreciate what you have until it's taken away. And so, I'll just make my plea again that people should not take it for granted. They should go out and vote.
Well, here's a pointed question. I don't mean it to be, but does it make a difference who they vote for in a local election?
I think so. I do, because very often national leaders get incubated here at the local level on school board, school boards, city councils, state legislatures. That's where the national political leadership is drawn from usually. So I do think you have to kind of weigh the candidates and see who you think has the best potential to be a leader.
Now, I'll move on. We can come back to this, but I'll move on to the sheriff race. And I guess I want to contextualize it by letting our viewers know that, at least in Jacksonville, the sheriff does not report to anyone. The sheriff is the top dog.
Right.
And in other cities, the sheriff is an arm of the mayor's office. Am I correct?
That's right. And Mayor Brown, I don't think, is the first mayor who has wished he could change that. But yes, in Duval County, the sheriff is a constitutionally elected officer and has a great deal of power and influence. And I don't think there's a lot of popular sentiment in this county to change that for the time being. Although over at City Hall, I'm sure that they would like to see that have it become more of a police commissioner, police chief type of position that's appointed rather than elected. But the voters here, I think, are comfortable with the way it is. And so we'll go to the polls and choose a sheriff because John Rutherford, the current sheriff, is termed out. So it will be either Mike Williams or Ken Jefferson in that race.
How long is the term for a sheriff?
Two terms. It's the same as the mayor's office, I believe.
Okay, contiguous mayor. Okay. And the purview of the sheriff's office is exactly what?
Well, the JSO has a big job. I mean, Duval County is just vast. And I mean, think of the challenges of you're dealing with violent crime in the urban core, which is also kind of spreading out to other parts of town. You've got a lot of more rural areas where there's different types of breaking the law and disorder. You've got, they also are in charge of a lot of traffic homicides and traffic accidents. That's a big part of what they do that people don't always stop to think about. And so law enforcement in this county is a big job, and it's an important decision for people to make because Florida has, or Jacksonville rather, on and off has been Florida's murder capital for over a decade. So even though overall crime rates have been trending down, we continue to still have a big issue with violent crime and homicide in Jacksonville.
I've been watching with interest some of the really great work that the new Hemming Plaza Board of Directors and program administrators have been unleashing, and its effect on the local homeless population, which I think was part of their plan, that by just bringing programming and bringing people, you're not really eliminating the homeless population, but you're not focused on them as much because you're a part of a bigger scene, and the homeless people are part of that scene.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Do you have any opinions about the direction that they're going in Hemming Park to make it more family friendly and the success that they're having lately, which is remarkable?
I think it's great. I love what they're doing. It was long overdue, and Wayne Wood, of course, a big historian and activist in the city, he's led the way on this.
Vince Cavan.
And Vince Cavan, they're doing an incredible job. And I really hope that the energy and the just the expression that's coming out of that radiates outward. I mean, that's the whole idea. When you talk to people with Downtown Vision Inc., it's the same idea. You have to kind of rub the two pieces of kindling together and get something going, and then hope that it spreads. And so, yeah, I mean, what they're doing in Hemming Park is exactly, I think, the way the city needs to be going.
I like that kindling image.
Yeah.
Speaking of Downtown Vision, they have a force of ambassadors who, for any of the viewers who don't know, the ambassadors are dressed in orange and ride bicycles, and they are available for any kinds of problems you might have. If you lose a wallet, or if you trip and fall, or whatever it might be, they're ever present in the downtown area. And in a sense, they seem to replace what the typical community police role was. Do you think that's actually happened? And if it hasn't, do you think we need more community police presence instead of the ambassadors, or in conjunction?
I think it's more of a both and than an either or. I think the police presence downtown, I think, is pretty good. I think the ambassadors are great. It's just that not enough people even know that they're there, and until they come across one, and then they learn about that. And I think the bigger issue is getting more people all over this vast area with so many suburban areas, getting more of those people excited about downtown, and getting more in the mindset of coming into the city and finding fun things to do in the city, in the urban core. And I think One Spark has been really transformative with that. What's going on with Friends of Hemming Park is doing great. The Downtown Investment Authority. There's so much energy now focused on pulling more people into the urban core, really building that up into something vibrant, that I think that's really where the momentum hopefully is going.
It's all happened in the last year. I mean, the Jackson's Market, which is the third Thursday of the month, and the Vagabond Coffee Flea Market on Saturdays, and now there's a Green Market, I believe, every Friday. For those with families, there is an awful lot going on besides the beautiful library and museum and Mosh that are just sitting there for the offing with incredible programming all the time and always changing.
Yeah, there's a lot happening, and I've been doing my show at WJCT for almost 6 years now, and so I can tell everyone who asks that I know firsthand, because people pitch me ideas all the time, there is no shortage of things to do. There's always something fun to do, really, all the time.
It's true. So let's move into the city council race. What are the issues in the city council election? Tell us who's running. For those who don't know, let's get everybody excited to get out there and
that's right.
Pull their Chad.
Their Chad. Oh man, I remember those Chads too. Some of the races have been decided, and there's lots of district races. So I guess I'll just talk about the at-large races that are still out there. There's 3.
First, tell us, what does an at-large representative mean?
There are 5 at-large seats on the 19-member city council. So that means there are 5 people on the council who are at large. They represent the interests of the whole city, not just their district. Then there are others who are district council representatives, and they hail from a certain district, and they focus on their constituents' needs in that district. And so, let's see, you've got, in the 3 district races that have yet to be decided, You've got Jacoby Pittman and Sam Newby in one. Now, Jacoby Pittman is the Democrat running, she is the CEO of the Clara White Mission in Jacksonville. She's running against Sam Newby, Republican, both African Americans in this race. And Jacoby Pittman will talk about her many years in the nonprofit sector and her community activism. Sam Newby's running more as a business and social conservative, so that's one. You've got another interesting race is former mayor and school board member Tommy Hazuri running for an at-large seat against businessman Jeff Youngblood. That's another D versus R matchup. That one's really interesting because those are two really strong personalities, and I've been to a couple of forums where they really went at it, really got into it, mixed it up, which you don't always see in these city council races. And then the other one is, I'm going to draw a blank here. There's one more at-large seat, and I'm so sorry, but I need my cheat sheet.
No, that's okay. The city council positions, well, first let me clarify one thing. The at-large positions, they actually do overlap the same territory. They're not parsed out by any geographics whatsoever.
Right, exactly right,
okay.
Exactly right.
And so then we go into the city council.
Oh, and I remember the other one. It's Kimberly Daniels, she's Democrat, African-American councilwoman, an incumbent, and she's facing Anna Brochet, a moderate Republican businesswoman, and that's the other one, and that's an interesting race too.
Anna is from the school board, is that correct?
No, she's in the private sector, I believe, but Kimberly Daniels has been on the council for some time. She's a very socially conservative Democrat, and she's facing an interesting challenge from Anna Brochet, who really has the support. You were talking about Jack's Biz and the chamber. Brochet really has the support of the local business community.
Can you tell us a little more about the elements of that election and why it's a particularly interesting race? And what voters should think about?
Well, it's interesting because there are some interesting cross currents politically in Duval County. You typically tend to see, like for example, in terms of the human rights ordinance, you would think that's an issue that mainly Republicans are against updating, but that's not always the case. There are some socially conservative Democrats, evangelical-minded Democrats who are anti-HRO, like Kimberly Daniels. So these candidacies and the local political dynamics are kind of complex. So depending on, the candidates may not have a cookie-cutter position on the issues.
Which is, again, another opportunity for the voters to really make a difference,
Yeah.
especially if you're the type of voter who doesn't necessarily vote along party lines.
Exactly. Yeah, and I would encourage everyone to research the candidates and make sure to vote.
Are there any upcoming debates that you are aware of that people can either watch?
There will be
from afar or visit?
There will be a couple of televised debates in the next week or so. One on First Coast News, one on Channel 4. I believe Action News is doing one as well, although I don't think Mayor Brown has agreed to do that one. And my organization, WJCT, will air the audio from First Coast News mayor and sheriff's debates. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to listen in and watch.
Now, have there been instances where one or the other candidate has not been comfortable or willing to show up?
Not this time so much, but I remember in 2011 when it came down to Alvin Brown and Mike Hogan. At the time, Hogan had a habit of not really showing up to a lot of these forums and debates. There was even a satirical Twitter account that sprung up called Mike Hogan's Empty Chair, because he was a no-show so often. A week before the election, even at my organization, WJCT, we set up a 1-hour televised debate, and that day we found out that Mike Hogan wasn't going to be there, so it ended up being an hour-long conversation with candidate Alvin Brown. So showing up is important, and I do think this time around, all of the candidates, there's been much more of an effort among most of the candidates to do that.
Well, is it a strategic advantage to show up or not show up? I guess you could debate it either way.
I guess you could. I think a lot of these candidates have been strategic about it. They haven't gone to everything. They can only go to so many of these, obviously. But in general, I think they've been pretty present, pretty visible.
Are there any other elections that are are there any other elections that are taking place that you would want to remind voters to pay attention to, and any issues that they can actually make a difference in attending the election?
I think that's really it. Those are the three big things to keep your mind on: the mayor's race, the sheriff's race, the city council races. There are a couple of ballot initiatives people can look at when they go to vote, but those are the three.
Can you give us a distinction between the two sheriff positions?
Well, on the one hand, you have Mike Williams, who's a Republican, had top-level administrative experience. He's John Rutherford's hand-picked successor, won his endorsement. On the other, you have Ken Jefferson, Democrat, African-American, former PIO, former crime analyst for Channel 4. What he brings extraordinary name recognition and likability. And so it'll come down to whether voters say, do I want the guy with the really strong administrative experience who has the blessing of the status quo, the powers that be now? Or do I want a new face, a new approach? Do I want somebody who I feel this personal connection to? I think it will be interesting to see how the voters go on that race.
So we have a city that is, in a sense, poised for a very big change. Or, as I believe the Times Union said a few weeks ago, could go back to sleep for 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, we could see a wave election, a lot of change, or we could see more of the same. I'm not going to make a prediction.
Yeah, it's just a question of how to convince residents that their vote really does matter. I think it's so overwhelming to feel, and easy to feel, apathy. And I just want to ask you to echo what I'm trying to echo as well, that it matters. It makes a difference even in the local elections, particularly in the local elections. As you said, this is a staging ground for larger office. And
yeah.
We can direct the course of our future by voting.
Maybe they should have a bar at all of the polling places. But you have to vote first to get your free drink. I think that would really help. Maybe that's the way to go.
That's great. That's great. Well, Melissa, we're wrapping up. If there's anything else you want to add, it's always fun talking with you, and I love seeing you, and your show is marvelous.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you, and I just wish you all the best, and thank you so much for joining us. And viewers, I will welcome you for our next show, and thank you, Comcast, for all of your support and making this show possible, and I wish you all a good night.
Why do we run? Because we can.
This is the race for the global eradication of polio. Join the race because you can.
You're watching Public Access on Xfinity 99, exclusive programming for Jacksonville Xfinity subscribers.